A person's life is often shaped not by circumstances, but by the way they think about themselves and the world around them, because the same situation can break one person and build another, depending entirely on mindset. And history has shown again and again that those who rise above hardship first change their thinking before their reality ever changes. Yet many people live their entire lives believing they are small, helpless, or unlucky, never realizing that these thoughts quietly decide their future. And this story begins with that timeless truth that life does not change when luck changes. It changes when perspective changes. And it invites the listener to reflect on a simple question. What if the limits you feel are not real, but only beliefs you have accepted? Because once the mind shifts, actions follow, and when actions change, destiny slowly begins to move in a new direction. At a busy railway station, among rushing passengers and echoing announcements, lived a beggar whose life followed the same pattern every day, waking up with no plan except survival, stretching out his hand to strangers, and hoping for kindness that often came in small amounts. And over time he had accepted this life as his fate, believing that he had nothing to offer and nothing to become, because society treated him as invisible. And he had slowly started seeing himself the same way, and although he was not lazy or cruel, he believed deeply that he was meant only to receive, not to give, and this belief shaped his actions, his posture, and even his hopes, which had grown faint with time, because when a person sees themselves as powerless, they stop imagining any future beyond today. One day, as the beggar was asking for money, his attention was drawn to a well-dressed businessman stepping onto the platform, confident in his walk and calm in his presence, and thinking that such a man must be generous. The beggar approached him with hope, but instead of giving money, the businessman asked a question that the beggar had never heard before, asking whether he ever gave anything to others or only took. And the beggar was shocked, because no one had ever challenged his role before, and he replied honestly that he was only a beggar and had nothing to give. And hearing this, the businessman calmly explained that he believed in exchange, that value must be offered to receive value, and that without giving something, one cannot expect anything in return. And with those words, he left, leaving the beggar standing still, replaying the conversation in his mind again and again. That night, the beggar could not sleep, because the businessman's words kept returning to him, quietly questioning everything he believed about himself. And for the first time, he wondered if people did not give him much, not because they were cruel, but because he offered nothing in return. And this thought felt uncomfortable, yet strangely honest, and he began asking himself a new question, not why others did not help him, but what he could give, even as a beggar. And although he felt confused and doubtful, a small shift had already begun inside him, because once a person questions their identity, change becomes possible, and that night marked the beginning of a new way of thinking. A few days later, while sitting near the tracks, the beggar noticed wildflowers growing freely beside the station, bright and alive despite their harsh surroundings, and suddenly an idea formed, simple yet powerful, and instead of asking for money with empty hands, he decided to offer something in return, plucking a few flowers and holding them carefully. And when someone gave him a coin, he smiled and offered a flower, and to his surprise, people accepted them with warmth, some even smiling back. And as the days passed, he noticed that when he gave flowers, people gave more generously, not out of pity, but appreciation. And slowly he realized that he was no longer begging, he was trading, because people were not giving him money for nothing, they were exchanging it for value. And with each flower he gave, his confidence grew, because for the first time, he felt useful, respected, and capable of creating worth. One day, the beggar saw the businessman again and eagerly approached him, offering flowers in exchange for money, and the businessman smiled, recognizing the transformation immediately, and told him that he had understood the true meaning of exchange, explaining that he was no longer just a beggar but a businessman in spirit. And those words deeply touched the beggar, because they confirmed what he had begun to feel inside, that his identity had changed, and from that moment, he stopped seeing himself as someone who depended on others, and a new sense of dignity filled him, because when a person changes how they see themselves, the world begins to respond differently as well. Months later, the The same railway station witnessed a different scene, as two well-dressed men met again, and one of them was the former beggar, now running a small but successful flower business, traveling to expand his work, and when the businessman recognized him, he was amazed, asking what had truly changed, and the answer was simple yet profound, that the beggar had stopped seeing himself as small, and once his mindset changed, his actions followed, proving that opportunity often appears only after belief changes, not before. The story ends with a powerful lesson that life is not limited by where you start, but by how you see yourself, because when you believe you are only a beggar, you will live like one, but when you recognize your ability to give value, growth becomes possible, and this truth applies to everyone, because success is not reserved for a few lucky people. It is created by those who change their thinking, take responsibility, and act with purpose. And the story gently reminds the listener to look inward and question the beliefs holding them back, because the moment mindset changes, effort gains direction, confidence replaces fear, and life slowly begins to transform, proving that when thoughts change, actions change, and when actions change, the future follows.